You can stand up. A couple of housekeeping things. We all have these devices. Please turn them off or set them to stun or whatever we do, so we don't interrupt the presentation. Biology breaks right out here. So if you just go out this door, restrooms are right there. Likewise, if there should be a siren or any kind of reason to evacuate the building, the staircase is right there. Okay. I'm ready to go when you are, and I will turn on the machine. You have 25 minutes. Oh wait, I have to remove this.
There's instructions. And we just want to introduce ourselves to begin with. Emma Flanagan.
Hi, Emma.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, Emma Flanagan. Nice to meet you. Hello, Emma Flanagan. Thank you for being here.
Nick Spinelli.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Hi.
You doing that?
Nick Spinelli. Nice to meet you guys.
Thanks. We found you.
Hello. Shake's not going to work. You're going to have to give me a hug, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks very much for doing this.
Of course. And this is Max.
Hey, Max. I'll just do the shake with you. Nice to meet you. Okay, you're good to go.
Yes. All right, so the mandatory disclaimers. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. So please make sure everyone knows who you are and who we are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes with an optional 5-minute additional time for a presentation to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you're finished, the judges will ask you 20 minutes worth of questions. And during the Q&A, you will stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role-playing. Some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important part. However, these should be described in simple, practical, common sense ways. Using technical philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. Similarly, any member of the team reading his or her part will also be considered a major mistake. Although, you may use notes. During the presentation, every member of the team must have some speaking role. And that's it. You tell me when you're ready, and we will start.
Okay, we are ready when you are. To begin, good morning and thank you very much to Airlines for America, the umbrella association of airlines nationwide, for being here and inviting us today to discuss, collaborate, and provide a recommendation in regards to the unethical dilemmas within the airline industry. We're here to provide a recommendation that will both revolutionize and as well promote a proactive mindset within the business world. We know that no matter where you're traveling, be it for friends, pleasure, or even business, that traveling is quintessential to the everyday life within society. As the Chief Executive Officer of a Force for Good consulting agency, my name is Emma Flanagan, and I'm here today with my fellow colleagues.
Hi guys, I'm Nick Spinelli, Vice President of Human Resources.
I'm Billy Wilson, I'm the Vice President of Finance.
And I'm Owen Alak, I'm the Vice President of Operations.
We're here to serve as a force for good, not only for the business world as a whole, but for the employees, the customers, and the community, as they truly are the fundamentals to a healthy and successful industry.
Through conducting thorough research and through the interview process, we have found 4 key issues within the airline industry that we thought to be most pertinent. They correlate with 4 ethical dilemmas as well. The first one that we're going to touch on is overbooking with dignity. The second one is going to be cramped seating with justice. The third will be false advertising with truth. And the fourth, we're going to talk about discrimination in correlation with the common good. I'm going to touch on overbooking within the industry first and how it is in violation of dignity when improperly done. In the year 2016 alone, 719 million passengers flew domestically. From that number, 475,000 passengers were overbooked passengers. And from there, 51,000 were actually denied boarding. Now, when you look at the numbers, you may think that 719 million passengers, only 475,000 overbooked. That doesn't seem like a big number. But we must first realize that every passenger has a place to be and people to see, and everybody must be treated in the same way in regards to overbooking. Now, if you look at this graph to the right, you can just see some of the major players in the airline industry today, and see the amount of denied boardings per 10,000 passengers. Now, towards the end, I just wanted to point out that JetBlue had a major spike here. That was due to their retraction of their overbooking. At one point, they had an overbooking policy that was not there, but towards the end, and the reason why they started asking denied boardings was because of some increase in plane size, so they had to start practicing overbooking, which led to these denied boardings. One simple mistake can lead to dramatic change in the industry, and that is very well represented in the United Airlines scandal that recently occurred a few years ago. In this instance, a man boarded a plane on an overbooked flight. Multiple passengers were overbooked on this flight. Many were compensated in order to leave, which so often occurs with overbooking. Although this certain man was not able to leave, was not willing to leave because he didn't believe his opportunity cost was there, because in fact, he wanted to go home because he had patients to see in the morning. Now, instances like this occur so often because of the overbooking that has been done within airlines. In fact, about a year ago, a congresswoman boarded a plane that was overbooked, and she happened to get on this plane that was overbooked while another passenger got off. A few weeks later, this woman files against her because she felt that she took the seat just because the airline felt that she was of more importance to her. It's instances like these that we feel it directly violates the dignity and respect that is due to every person. We took a look at United's mission statement and what they were all about to see if it was in correlation with some of the policies that they had put in place. I want to point out the last statement that they make, which says, "Our goal is to make every flight a positive experience for our customers." Now, I don't know about you, but these two instances are not at all a positive experience. They do not correlate with the ethical principles that they seem to stand for. To get into financial dimensions of overbooking, compensation can vary in terms of getting people to no longer be overbooked, but it is often considered inadequate by many, like our doctor that I just pointed out in the United Airlines scandal. Airlines often do keep the money, even if a passenger does not show up. The overbooking that they practice is because so many of these passengers don't show up, but they still are able to keep a lot of that money. And through this, we see that airlines tend to only care about profit and image. But we feel as if a better solution to overbooking is there, which will allow better profit and better image, which is so vital to the airline industry. We also wanted to make sure that you know that this is a completely legal dimension. This is a legal practice, but at times it can be improperly done, as showcased before. And we do have some recommendations to this that we feel will meet the ethical and financial dimensions that I pointed out. The first is that we want to encourage booking passengers on rival carriers. We feel that in doing so, this will allow the consumer to get to their point of interest in a relatively same time and at that same price point, which will allow for return service. Also, to reduce the margin of overbooked flights. This will in turn decrease overbooking and will allow for better consumer satisfaction. An increase in compensation is also something that we felt financially could help this problem. The United Airlines man, the doctor that boarded the plane, didn't feel that this compensation was adequate because there is a cap set to that compensation that airlines can give to their consumer when trying to get them off the plane. So he didn't feel that this was adequate, and we feel that an increase in the compensation available will allow for this problem to be non-existent. And the last recommendation that we want to give that we feel is in line with the ethical portion of this is to always solve this problem in the terminal and not on the plane. You can't have passengers getting on this plane that's overbooked and then telling them to get off and dragging them off bloodied like it had happened before. Things like this arise against the dignity of a person, and we feel like it cannot happen that way.
So the second issue we'd like to talk to you about today in the airline industry is cramped seating. And we feel the ethical issue that goes along with this is justice. Now, justice can be simply defined as giving one what they are due. In 1978, Congress passed the Airline Deregulation Act. This act had the intention of making flight cheaper and more accessible to all Americans. And by and large, it was very successful. It opened up flight to the middle class more so than any other bill. However, Congress gave the airline industry a number of freedoms that we feel they've overstepped. Since 1978, the average seat on an airplane has shrunk by 10%. Now, in that same time, the average American has grown 1.5 inches and gained 25 pounds. Now, also, since 2009, the average price of an airline ticket has gone up 12%. So what we're seeing is customers continually paying more and more for less space on an airplane. We have to raise the question, is that what they are due? Is that just? So we decided to look at the code of conduct for a lot of these companies, and I'd like to point out one where JetBlue says respect is a hallmark of who we are. Now, I'll remind you what Billy said. JetBlue was the second highest in involuntarily deboarding rates out of all the airlines just last year. Saying respect is who they are. That's not giving their customers justice. You know, the serious concern here is the safety issues that come with the cramped seating. So in this 1978 Act, airlines were given a regulation that all planes must be able to be evacuated within 90 seconds or less. Now, these are two circumstances that have happened in recent history in which that requirement was not met. When the plane landed on the Hudson River, it took those passengers 120 seconds to get off the plane. And in this Las Vegas plane fire that happened in 2015, it took 180 seconds, double the time of the regulation. So these regulations that airlines have, which are already few compared to what they were, are still not being met. Now, financially speaking, the reason airlines do this is they simply want to sell more tickets and increase their revenue. If you can shrink a seat, you can sell more tickets and fit more people on an airplane. And that's understandable. Legally speaking, on the safety front, this opens up a lot of liabilities from lawsuits for improperly managing the lives of their customers, for airlines. And also, Congress is catching up with the airlines' practices because Congressman Steve Cohen introduced the SEAT Act as a part of the FAA reauthorization bill that was introduced to Congress just last year and has gotten bipartisan support. So Congress is cracking down. We'd like to be proactive instead of reactive into dealing with this problem. Our recommendations are rather simple. We'd like airline seat sizes to be standardized so we can meet these safety regulations that are so vital to the lives of every passenger. What this will also do is it'll make customers more comfortable. It'll keep them coming back time and time again because they're satisfied on your airline.
Thank you. Trust is defined as the act or state of being true. Ever since being raised in Dayton, Ohio, my mom has always taught me that honesty is the best policy, which I'm sure we can all agree upon. Unfortunately, within the airline industry today, this is not being followed, and as Owen just stated, you are now paying for a smaller seat with additional health and safety risks. Now, as individuals with places to go and people to see, traveling with ease should simply be a breeze. As there are a gamut of reasons for traveling, be it for friends, family, business, or even pleasure, we are all striving to achieve the common good as our final destination. However, due to the break in the path, as you can see in this diagram, due to the lack of trust between individuals, the customers, and companies such as Southwest, there's currently a break in the path towards achieving the common good. Now, as many others in this room that are very stressed and have plenty going on with their lives in terms of work, family, academics, and so much more, I'm sure we could all use a weekend getaway. For example, Florida. When booking your next flight, you may come across advertisements such as this, advertising a $59 flight, which may seem too good to be true. Too good to be true, you think? Yes. Unfortunately, Southwest and many airlines such as themselves have been utilizing the traditional bait and switch tactic in which they utilize and lure in millions of individuals across the world By selling and advertising prices such as this, they're only available to about 5 of every 200 seats available, which leads to misinformed customers nationwide. In regards to the financial dimensions, we can see that beginning in 2012 and 2013, they were advertised flights at $100, $59, and $66, which are too good to be true due to the lack of ability for customers to achieve, which ultimately led to a fine of $200,000. Now, you may be thinking that $200,000 is a measly amount for a company so big as Southwest. And while it is something that may not be in the big scheme in regards to finances, as they can easily write it off in a check, but it's more than just a slap on the wrist, but a wake-up call for them to get their act together and get their priorities straight for their customers. In regards to legal financial dimensions, due to their not once, twice, but 3-time violations, they violated the full fair advertising rules, and lastly, violated the cease and desist orders from previous orders within the airline industry. Our recommendations to solve false advertising is by starting with you, Airlines for America. We hope that you can provide more stricter regulations and punishments for the airlines so they really truly understand the priorities of the airlines as a whole and to always put the customers first. And then secondly, we hope to establish more severe violation punishments so it's more than just a $200,000 check that airlines such as Southwest can write off, but something that really wakes them up and allows them to understand that they need to get their priorities straight. Next, we hope that airlines such as Southwest will learn and grow from their mistakes over time and truly put their customers first. Secondly, we hope to establish a longer line of command when approving these ads, as it's quintessential to ensure that these ads and their numbers are appropriately marketed to the audience. Third, we want to ensure that we maintain a customer-centric company so that we're always putting the needs of the customers first, which is truly valuable. And lastly, being committed to transparency, which is what Southwest prefers to go by. Ultimately, we hope this leads to increased company and customer loyalty and relationships so that they keep coming back to us to achieve the common good in wherever their destination may lead them, and allow them to achieve the common goal of traveling and ease as they please.
Thank you. The fourth ethical dimension that we're going to look at is that of racial discrimination and how it particularly pertains to the common good. So discrimination is already prohibited under federal law for the instances stated on the screen: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, and ancestry. Well, in 2017, the NAACP issued a travel advisory to African Americans flying on American Airlines flights. Why did they do this? Well, they received an influx of some suspicious behavior or traits of behavior happening on American Airlines flights. They issued the travel advisory and were appalled at some of the responses that they got back. The NAACP president actually said that everyone traveling must be guaranteed a right to travel with safety. So here are 4 instances of racial discrimination. The first one was when an African American man was removed by the pilot of a plane that he boarded. Whenever he got on the plane, 2 white individuals made derogatory and discriminatory comments towards him. He, understandably so, responded to them in a way that got himself removed from the plane. The issue is that the 2 white individuals who initiated the instance were permitted to stay on the plane and make it to their destination, while the African American man was required to deboard. We believe that's an instance of racial discrimination. The second is when an African American woman was removed by the pilot on a flight. What had happened was she had booked a confirmed first-class ticket with a white traveling companion. A white individual comes up to the gate and wants a first-class ticket. Well, they go ahead and look at who's sitting in first class, and they select her as the individual that will be bumped to the back of the plane. She protests and says, "I paid for this ticket, this isn't my first-class ticket, I have a right to sit up here." Didn't really make a difference to the airlines. They still made her sit in the back, and the white individual was able to take her space in first class. The third instance is when an African American woman was removed by the pilot whenever she complained that her seat was changed without her knowledge. She initially booked her ticket to sit in that middle row, which understandably so, no one wants to sit in, but then called up the airline and asked to move to the aisle. Airline said no problem. They sent her issued her a new ticket, says it right there on her screen or on her piece of paper. shows up to the staging area, just about ready to get on the plane. The airline lets her know, "You're actually back in the middle because we don't have enough room to move you." She said, "You told me that I did. I was able to change my reservation. I have the proof of it right here." She asked to speak to the pilot. The pilot came out, and after a conversation, the pilot had decided that she actually got herself a one-way ticket off the plane. The fourth instance of racial discrimination that we just find so egregious here is when an African American woman was removed by a pilot on a flight so that the pilot could accommodate a traveling white individual's dog to sit in her seat. This again just sort of shows the type of behavior that is going on American Airlines flights. So airline discrimination. In the year 2017, American Airlines received 26 complaints to the Transportation Association. 26. Now you might be saying, Nick, I thought you just said there were hundreds of complaints. Well, these are only the 26 that were actually reported to the Transportation Association. After the NAACP issued the travel advisory, they received over 600 contact points. The NAACP did. So if you look at the number here, 26, you may think to yourself, 26 isn't that much. Well, whether it's 26 or 2,600, these people are individuals with places to go and deserve to be treated with the respect that they deserve. So how can we address, or how does this affect the financial aspect? Well, African Americans account for roughly 15% of the US population. So let's use a rough number of 50 million people. If 10% of African Americans adhere to the travel warning, that's 5 million people. If your average two-way ticket on an airline is $250, that results in a total revenue hit to your company of over $1.2 billion. The legal aspect. Discrimination is already illegal and prohibited under federal law, so you shouldn't be doing it, or the airlines shouldn't be doing it. That being said, your core values that you state are that you want to maximize profits, understandably so. You want to reduce regulations. Who can blame you? And the other one is customer safety. There's nothing wrong with any of those. The trouble happens, though, whenever you're sacrificing one to achieve the other. Whenever you're so concerned with maximizing profits that you ignore customer safety, as with the example of Owen, and cramming more people onto the flight, but not able to get them off. That 90 seconds isn't a suggestion, but a requirement. All right? And so now recommendations. What are some ways you can specifically tackle racial discrimination? Well, one is you can be honest whenever you mess up. And whenever these types of things happen and make it to the public, you can own up to it. Jump out ahead of it, because now it's a PR battle. And you need to do more than just save face by apologizing, but you need to take some substantial steps to combat it. One of them, we believe, is limiting the discretion of the pilot. We believe that it's a very tight line to walk in terms of letting the pilot be the only one who determines who can board and who cannot board a flight. Instead, we recommend that in the instance of a confrontation, we're trying to figure out who flies and who stays behind, you contact the floor supervisor for that airline. That way, they're able to come out, someone who the pilot actually answers to and is accountable to, as opposed to letting the individual bias of that pilot affect the whole airline. You're letting one individual in his decision affect the perception of an entire company. So we've touched on 4 ethical issues, okay? The first being overbooking. The second, cram seating. Third, false advertising. And the fourth, racial discrimination. Now with overbooking, we know that when someone shows up, they have a ticket, they have plans, they have a place to be, and you tell them at the last minute, you're not flying today. That is not treating them with the respect that they deserve, with the dignity that they are due. In terms of cramped seating, whenever you shrink the size of seats, but jack up the price for that seat, whenever you cram more people onto an airline, but can't evacuate them in time to save their lives, you are not treating them with the justice that they deserve. Whenever you are advertising ticket prices, and you are advertising a price that is too good to be true, a bait and switch tactic, telling the customer that it's $59, but really, with your fingers crossed behind your back, you know it's going to cost them $200. That is not true. That is not being honest with them, and that is not treating them with the respect that they deserve. And fourthly, with racial discrimination, whenever you decide who can fly and who can't fly on an airline just based on the color of their skin or their race, you are not treating them with the respect that they are due. Simply put, we know that Airlines for America has the ability to lobby for industry-wide standards. We want you to take seriously our recommendations, to implement them, so that your industry, who you represent, is able to continue to become a force for good. Thanks so much. We're happy to come here and speak with you, and we hope to follow up with you soon.
Well, thank you. I have a couple of questions. These are businesses. This is not summer camp. So a couple of people get bumped off a flight. There are other flights. They're going to get to their destination. Why is that an ethical problem?
Well, I think it comes to be an ethical problem, especially when the instance where people are denied boarding, especially when the instance like the United flight, when they actually get on the flight. We feel that violates the respect that they are due, because you're expected to go to this place, you're getting on the plane ready to go, but then you're asked to leave. We don't feel that that's quite an ethical standpoint that these companies want to take for their best interest, and especially with the denied boarding part, we don't feel that that's right in terms of the ethical aspect.
And it's not like they just found out that this flight is going to be overbooked last minute. They're waiting for these people to get onto the plane before they take action to address it.
They're offering a lot of money. I flew out here from Los Angeles on Monday, and the flight before mine, they offered people $500 to give up their seat. It's a pretty good deal.
But the instances where the opportunity cost isn't there, this doctor had patients to see in the morning. You know, he has work to do, but we pick you. You have to get off this plane. Well, I don't care how much money you offer me. I don't want to go. And that's where we feel that that infringes on, you know, the respect that they are due.
Thank you for your presentation. As you were going through the various categories, what came to mind for me was the training requirements that are required. Southwest is a huge airline that's known for customer service. They train all of their individuals pretty thoroughly from start to finish, and that those do meet all the training and development regulations. So in terms of how might they approach a customer and share with them that they have to deboard. So what occurred for me is that if the airlines are meeting and continually training their employees to speak with dignity and to, for example, work with the floor manager to say, can you work with the pilot to figure out who may have to deboard and not deboard, and this is the communication message. What's unethical about that? So they're following their talking points, their training guidelines, they're probably following a script to some degree. Can you share a little bit more about where they might be falling short in training and development of their employees?
So in regards to training and development, there's always more that we can do as an industry. So we can't just stop at the bare minimum or the requirements that we need to meet the needs of the individuals that we're serving. So in regards to training, we can continue to train our employees and make them as frequent as possible to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and what they're expected to do within their roles. And then in regards to what's unethical about what they're doing right now is truly the behavior and mindset of how they're dealing with customers, as we need to make sure that we are a customer-centric company that are putting the needs of our customers first and being mindful of different biases that may occur over time and making sure that we make their traveling as smooth and as efficiently as possible.
And if I could add, it's never okay to deboard someone based on race, right? So that was the discrimination spec. And so making sure that we do everything possible to even avoid the illusion or the optics that the reason someone is being deboarded is not because of their race is very important. And that's difficult because, we're not saying that you have no right to ever deboard an African American individual. We understand why the policy is there, and so that's to protect the airlines themselves from having belligerent people get on the plane. We understand that. The trouble is, though, if there is not a reason for someone to get off the plane, there needs to be really careful steps taken so that the people getting off are understand why, and feel that they were treated with a certain level of respect that we feel they're due.
To add to that also is that in doing research around the various training and development above the requirements that are needed, as someone who partners with the airline industry, I would say that the way that we check in with various airline companies is to say, like, are you following these regulations? Are you training your pilots on unconscious bias? Are you training your customer service members on how to approach a difficult situation? And as an external party, that's probably the best that Airlines for America can do, as you're interacting with multiple airline corporations. And so I appreciate the feedback in terms of how we can continue to help strengthen the way that training happens.
For me, I don't really have any questions, but I'm a commercial aviation major myself, so when you guys brought this topic up, I found it very, very interesting, some of the things you went over. It shows the amount of effort and the preparation you guys have put into it. It was very well put together. I like some of the suggestions, especially the idea of saying taking it out of the pilot's hands. But being a pilot, I feel like it should ultimately be up to the pilot because he's responsible for the whole flight safety. That was one of the things right now.
Sure, and understandably so. And that's why we don't want to take it totally out of his hands, but we just don't want the decision to be only his. We want him to at least have to check in, and that way someone above him is responsible for that decision, and they're talking about it together, as opposed to that individual just coming and telling the pilot what to do. We want them to have a conversation.
Our member companies, these airlines, only make money if two things happen. Planes are full and planes are in the air. Studies show that to really make money, they have to be flying 18 hours a day. It means quick turnarounds on the ground, get people off the plane, get their luggage off the plane, get the next set of folks on, get back up in the air. Aren't you going to just inhibit the ability of these companies to make money and actually force them out of business with these suggestions?
Well, it may hurt the bottom line if they make the seats a little bigger and they can't sell as many tickets, but if you're putting your customers' lives at risk when they're flying, we feel that's a greater cause than the damage that may happen to the bottom line.
And I think I'd push back that there is going to be damage to the bottom line, because I think what is going to be more damaging is when Congress comes in and tries to regulate your industry. What we're trying to do is proactively prevent that from happening. And by doing so, yes, we're going to tighten up your internal rules, hopefully, and you'll be able to tell the airlines. But what is really going to hurt the bottom line is whenever they're acting carelessly, Congress comes in and says everyone's getting a luxury extra wide seat, and now we have a lot less seats on the plane. And so I think that's really the opposite of your view.
And just to add to it a little bit, we're in the days of social media, where everything gets out, and that was especially prevalent in the United's case, where 24 hours later, everybody and their mother knows that this guy was dragged off the plane.
Even the mother not on social media.
But people don't exactly realize that 3 weeks later, United lost $900 million in market cap space, which can have a dramatic impact financially on a company for just this one instance, because they're not in correlation with the standards that we think that they should have.
And they could have offered another so they offered money, tried to get volunteers, but then after they didn't get enough, they just picked him, as opposed to trying to incentivize someone by raising the amount they were offering. So they chose that 900 over a couple dollars. I mean, should have been the opposite.
I have seen some changes come through that. You might have seen it on social media. There was a passenger who was given $10,000 to vacate his seat. So United has made a couple of changes with that. And I believe it's United Airlines that has all the issues with the pets passing away.
Yeah, they did.
With that Boston Terrier.
Yeah. But once again, that's if you look at the situation, that dog was required to fly in the what is that?
Overhead?
Yeah, the overhead. The people who are in charge of that plane need to use more common sense than expect to put a living animal in a closed space like that. And so that's their own fault and hopefully a learning experience, but it's going to cost them a lot of money to learn that lesson.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people are canceling their memberships with United. You know, you're seeing the whole cancel your United card and get rid of it.
So I think the focus here is in the wrong direction. You're focusing on one person out of 300 passengers. What about the 299 who are inconvenienced when I make a fuss on the plane and it takes 15 minutes for them to get me off the plane because I'm making a fuss? What about the 299?
Well, I would just answer that they're not going to have this fuss if this situation doesn't occur in the first place. And by giving these recommendations, we feel that that one person won't be there to have these other 300 people, make a fuss about that.
Yeah, so if we use the number 300 people are flying, and Bill said that, the biggest part of his recommendation was to handle it before they got on the plane. Perhaps those 300 people aren't even seeing what's happening in their ability to resolve this issue. If they seek out the person who they've overbooked and isn't able to get on the flight, don't wait till they're walking onto the flight to tell them that. You got to call their name over the intercom. How many people have been in an airport and we've heard them say, "Would Mr. and Mrs. Jones please report to the gate?" That's probably because they're late. But maybe we should also be calling those people who aren't going to fly to let them know. Whenever you book a reservation, you put your phone number in. They could give you a call and let you know, "Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we're not able to fly you today. You were booked with an overbooked ticket. We'd be happy to change your reservation. If you stay on the line, we'll transfer you to our ticket master."
I think that happens. I mean, to get here, I had a very, interestingly enough, a situation on Southwest Airlines myself, where they were overbooked, and there was a lady sitting behind me who was part of an ongoing flight, so she just stayed in seat while they docked in, where did we stop, Baltimore? And the Southwest agent came on board and said, you need to deboard. And she said, "Well, I have a confirmed reservation. I'm trying to get to Boston. I have an important engagement, whatnot." And there was another man who was on standby who also had a confirmed reservation because it was overbooked. And I'm sitting there like, now I'm 45 minutes behind, and there was this whole argument going on the plane, and people were not feeling good about it. But in that moment, I also thought, well, I'm really glad that they're being strict with this passenger, and they're saying, we're following regulations, we have guidelines around how we deal with overbooking and so on. And so I can understand where you're coming from in terms of that probably wasn't a good experience for that lady who had to deboard. However, I agree with my fellow companion here to say that everybody else was inconvenienced on that plane, and we can't make everybody happy. So if 299 customers are happy, one's not, we're a business, we're gonna continue to move forward. I mean, as a business, would you agree that would you keep 299 customers happy and on time to get to their destination, or let this one person know that they need to make change?
Now, yeah, we would rather 299 happy and one unhappy than the other way around. But what Billy was really pointing out was these are situations that should have been handled prior to her getting on the plane. They should have been stopped her at the gate, let him in, had someone hold her at the gate, the plane could have taken off. So no matter how unhappy she was, the 300 people on the plane were happy.
Right.
So then you just have one unhappy 300, and that's if. I guess it goes back to the training where if the employees can handle the situation a little bit better.
But I would say that in a perfect world, yes, one person would be unhappy, 299 wouldn't be, or would be. But I think if you'd have looked past that lady, you'd have probably seen 15 to 20 phones capturing that moment if it was really that big a deal. And so now, whenever they're sharing it with their friends or putting it on social media, it's not just that one lady that is unhappy. Because what everyone at home sitting on the phone is seeing is they're seeing an airport official or an airline official treating this person hopefully with respect. We hope so. But now they associate, Southwest. They're booting people off. And so I think it's bigger than just that one person, but it's what reach on social media does it, and that's why you have to be very careful. And we have to create, and we hope that you'll implement some sort of public and positive social media campaign. Think about that.
We are out of time in character, so take a deep breath, relax, the hard part is over. We'll step out of character as
Yes.
well and back into our normal roles.
Great job.
You were poised, none of our questions threw you, so you obviously prepared well. I thought your use of the slides was terrific, because you never turned your back on the audience to look at the slides. You knew your material, so congratulations, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you get to the next round, the 10-minute presentations, really focus on the ethical aspects of it. Okay?
Great job. Really enjoyed hearing all of your points of view and perspectives. I agree. Like we didn't seem to shake you. We were trying to be a little rough and saying, like, you know, what do we do about profit margin? That happens in boardrooms, and you know, the bottom line is important for many corporations. I would just say, when you get into your 10-minute presentation, I would physically break up a little bit, maybe use the room a little bit more in your favor. So there's a couple times where I was like glancing over and I was like, what was that percentage? So just, you know, use your physical space really well. So if you're stepping forward or you're stepping forward to present, that will also happen to you when you go out into the working world and do other things. Like, you just have to use your space in a way that engages the audience. So kind of loosen up a little bit and kind of re-engage. And but I really enjoyed all of your points of view. I enjoyed being, I keep forgetting my name. Airlines coordinator. That was really cool, so thank you for assigning us that role. And yeah, great presentation overall.
I don't think I can add much to what these guys have already said, but I enjoyed it a lot. You guys did a very, very good job, and like they were mentioning, I never saw anybody turning back to glance at the slide. You guys put the preparation into it. Good job.
Thank you.
Did you have fun?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
Just one quick question on the side note. With that flight with Dr. David Dow, when he was taken off that plane, did United do anything with the remaining passengers on the plane to compensate him for some way the other 299?
I don't know that.
I feel like I do remember seeing that, but I'm not 100% sure on reading on that. I don't remember anything specifically coming up on what they did with those passengers, so I'm not completely sure.
Why are you going to say you were on a flight?
No.
You got to check.
Talk to a pilot.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sophomore.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All sophomores.
Thank you so much.